it's Nicole. I'm here today for Scrapbook and Cards Today magazine. I'm going to show you how you can create some really fun cards just with a little fussy cutting. So what I have here is some Simple Stories Hello Summer, a trusty pair of scissors, and a set of itty bitty greeting stamps from Stamping Up. And I'm really actually only going to use this patterned paper here from the Hello Summer collection by Simple Stories. I'm going to fussy cut a bunch of these flowers. When I first saw this paper, I immediately thought I wanted to cut all these flowers out. I did not want to use the paper the way it is. And I know what you're thinking, oh my gosh, Nicole, fussy cutting is such a pain. But it's really not. It's really simple. You can see here I'm starting to fussy cut this flower out of the pattern paper. And there's just a couple tips I wanted to provide you. So the first thing is, as you can see, my scissors really aren't moving. I find people have a lot of trouble with fussy cutting because they're trying to wiggle their scissors in and around the element. Pick your element that you're going to cut out, in this case it's a flower, and let the scissors do the work. So what I do is I'm going to hold the scissors with one hand and really guide the paper with my other hand around the blades of the scissors. I leave a bit of a gap too, so I always try to leave like not even a quarter of an inch, an eighth of an inch, a 16th, just a little tiny white guide around the edge of that element to provide a little bit of an oopsie in case you slip your scissors. So I'm going to speed up the video a little bit, but I'm just going to fussy cut a whole lot more flowers. I'm going to go into even these tiny little itty bitty thin and delicate ones. These ones are really great because they can add a lot of texture to your card and they're great for fill-ins, so don't neglect those. So I'm going to just go around and you can see I'm not really moving my scissors a whole heck of a lot. I'm really moving the paper more than the scissors, and I'm going to guide around leaving a little tiny gap from the paper on the edge. And if you ever buy a die cut pack, you'll notice that when everything's die cut, there is that white little edge around it anyway. So I find that if you fussy cut and you allow that little white line around that pattern paper piece, you're actually doing exactly what the die cutting machine would do if it were to have punched this out. So it's going to look like a little bit of a die cut when you're done. I'm going to just do a few more flowers here from this paper and don't neglect the edges of the paper. You can see there on my craft mat that I've actually cut just a little bit of a half flower. I'm going to do a few of those because those little tiny pieces go a long way. They're not garbage. You can add those as layerable pieces to a card or even a scrapbook layout. Nothing on that pattern paper should be tossed. You really should be able to stretch that pattern paper pretty well by fussy cutting. So I'm just going to do a few more flowers here to add to my stash. When I'm going to fussy cut, I generally will fussy cut a whole lot of elements while I'm watching TV or doing something else, and then I get started. So I have this card here that I have started. I've gone ahead and die cut the background here from a cut file from Just Nick, and I'm just adding some foam adhesive to the back of it. I'm going to trim down the foam adhesive a little bit because it's a little bit too wide to fill in my thin gap here, and I'm just going to I'm using white cardstock for the background piece, as you can see, and just some textured white cardstock for my base of my card. And I've just trimmed that down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I like folding cards on the top edge just to add a little bit of variety than your standard A2 size card that's folded along the left side. So I'm just going to add this to the back of the card with the foam adhesive, and I really like adding the foam behind something like this. It adds a nice little visual layering from the white on the white. You definitely could cut this same design from pattern paper. It would look pretty too, but I really, for some reason, wanted to do a white on white kind of thing. So that's where I'm going with this one. So I'm just going to add in tiny little bits of foam adhesive and stick that down there on my cardstock. I've gone ahead and I've already stamped one of those itty bitty greetings from the Stampin' Up set. There just says a little hello, and I've just layered that here onto some, it's almost like I guess a coral colored cardstock. It kind of matches with those flowers that I fussy cut. So I'm going to layer that here in the bottom left corner. And then to give my fussy cut elements some dimension, I'm just going to curl them, as you can see, with a pencil. So I just took a pencil and gently curled them up a little bit. Don't go too crazy, but just you want your edges to kind of have a little bit of dimension so they're not quite so flat. And then I'm going to use a lot of foam adhesive here to get those elements to look like puffy stickers. And so I'm going to use more of that foam adhesive and just add that in behind these items. The other thing I like about fussy cutting is if you were to buy a sticker set, a lot of times you have flowers especially grouped together, or maybe stars or hearts all grouped together. In this case, because I fussy cut them, I can kind of fiddle around with where I want to put things, and it makes it kind of unique. It doesn't look like somebody else's project as well. So I like fooling around with that too. I'm just playing around a little bit with all the different colors here. I have fussy cut from the flowers. And then when I have my flowers in place, I'm just going to use those tiny little skinny elements that I cut out with a little bit of wet glue and just get those tucked in to kind of fill in those gaps. I'm just trying to finish off the rest of the card. I'm going to end up putting a few here down on that bottom corner of that sentiment, and then add a little bit of bling, and then I'll pretty much finish my card. Really simple card actually, with the die cut design and all those fussy cut flowers. Really not a lot going on, pretty simple, and really I think kind of pretty in the end. A little bit of bling to the center of the flowers just to add a little bit more dimension. You could add enamel dots, you could add some pearls. If you have little brads, you could poke them through the center of the flowers. You could do a lot of things. You had Nouveau drops, you could add Nouveau drops and let them sit. So a lot of fun things you could do just to kind of jazz up those fussy cut paper pieces. A couple last pieces of bling, and I think that is pretty much it for this one. So I'm going to go on to my second card now, and I have actually had this ring cut out. It's from a Gina K die set that I had. I actually just had this. I didn't use it, so it was perfect for me just to use to add to the front of this card. So I'm just going to add some foam adhesive to the backing of that. And I'm going to add that to the front of my card, but first I want to make a little bit of a pattern behind that circle. So I have this cardstock stencil, I'm going to call it, that I've already cut out. You can see I've used it before with yellow, so there's still a little bit of yellow remaining on the top of it. So I thought if I add some blue, that's going to give me a nice kind of green that will match with those leaves and those fussy cut flowers. And I'm using some Vicky Bouton art crayons and just one of her stencil brushes also, just to kind of smooth that on. It gives it that nice, it's really simple background, as you can see. So now I'm going to add that circle frame back right in, and then I'm going to fill in around that circle frame with those fussy cut flowers. So this first one here is what I actually cut from the edge of the pattern paper earlier. And because some of the leaves were kind of cut off on the end, I just took my scissors and trimmed it down a little bit more so you can't tell that the leaves were cut. I actually just kind of shaped the leaves with my scissors. So again, nothing's garbage. You can use those edges of the paper really easily and really stretch your supplies. So I'm just going to fiddle around now again with those flowers, and I'm going to use foam adhesive behind most of them. I'm going to start off with the full cut flowers, as I'm going to call them, the full image of the flowers, kind of start filling in my frame. And then I'm going to actually add in some of those little tiny half pieces you can see up at the top there, just to kind of fill in the gaps. So if you know that you want to have just a half piece of something peeking out, why put a whole flower there? Just use those little half pieces from the edge of the pattern paper and use them to fill in those gaps. So again, those little tiny pieces that you have are perfect for that. I decided that I wanted a little more blue on the front of this card and not quite so much pink, so I went back in and I'm just going to fussy cut out this blue flower really pretty quickly. And again, if you see, the scissors are not doing a lot of the work. It's actually me wiggling the paper and maneuvering it around the scissors. And I'm going to curl it slightly with my fingers and then just pop dot that in with some foam adhesive. So it goes really pretty quickly. Yes, the fussy cutting does take a little bit of time and effort, but I think it adds just a really nice touch and completely unique. You can move those flowers around in several different ways. So I have a few more of those little stems, those stamen, I guess you could call them. I'm just going to fill those in around my wreath here. And then I think really at this point, I'm just going to add one more little flower underneath, this half flower, and then a few pieces of bling, and that's it. You can take a look here. I love how this wreath one turned out with that polka dot background and the fussy cut flowers around that circle. And the one with the floral grouping over top of the die cut. Really simple, right? Just a tiny little effort, and you have a couple special cards that I'm sure will make anyone's day lovely. So I hope you'll give this a try. I'll see you again next month on Design with Nicole, and have yourself a great day.